The intention of this panel is called Innovative Approaches to Youth Employment and Training, What's Working? And in this panel, our goal is to really explore, we've talked about some of the models that we're using when it comes to youth training and employment. But frankly, we have borrowed from many, many, many other employment and training models from across the province, from across the country, North America, and beyond. And I know there's many folks in this room and a couple who are going to be joining us virtually who have a lot to say about what's working in terms of youth training and employment, and some innovative solutions that perhaps we haven't thought about, folks in the room haven't thought about. And so we want to create a space where we can share those and really learn from each other. So I'm going to invite Christine Young, Stacey Hoffe, Rory Lambert, and Chelsey MacNeil to join us at the panel station over here. And we also have a couple folks who are joining us virtually. So we have McDonald, who's the Business Development Officer Entrepreneurship with the CNA campus in Corner Brook. And we also have Scott Andrews, who's a business development manager with Futurpreneur. So both of those folks are going to be joining us virtually. But otherwise, I invite you now, folks, to join us up here and we'll get going.
Awesome. Folks, thanks so much to the panelists for joining us for this really super interesting conversation on approaches to youth training and employment, and really kind of identifying what's working. I think the panelists represent folks from across the province and also in disciplines. We've got Scott speaking from the self-employment kind of lens or entrepreneurship lens, service providers, and we're just so happy to have all of you with us. So with that, let's get started with just an easy question. And that question is, introduce yourself and what connection you have to the topic of youth training and employment. So why don't we start with Rory?
Hello, my name is Rory Lambert. As I've mentioned, I'm the training and employment lead at Choices for Youth. And so I develop and design and deliver with my team training programs to increase young people's employability.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Stacey Hoffe. My pronouns are she and her. I am the executive director of Mokami Status of Women Council in Happy Valley, Goose Bay, Labrador. Mokami Status of Women Council is an equity serving organization that supports women and gender diverse folks in our community. And we provide a supportive living program. We provide advocacy, system navigations, other supports, arts, cultural events, all those really important pieces that matter in terms of our holistic selves. And we run a thrift store called Thrifty Fashions, which was featured earlier in the presentation. And so we are so thrilled to have partnered with Choices for Youth to be able to build a supportive employment program within our thrift store. So as mentioned, our thrift store has existed for about 30 years, but this is the first time where we've been able to implement a supportive employment program. And I can't wait to brag a little bit about all the wonderful things that have happened since we started this partnership with Choices.
Christine.
And hi, I'm Christine Young. I'm the Chief Executive Officer with the YMCA of Western Newfoundland. I've been in that position for, I cannot believe this because I'm far too young for this. I started at age 12, but I've been there since 1997. So I celebrated my 25th anniversary with the Y this summer. I inherited youth employment, community initiatives. All that programming was very solid and in place at the Y when I began. And we've continued through various, changes in government priorities, various levels of government, went through the devolution of programs from federal to provincial, partnered with different organizations and other institutions over the course of that 25 years to continue to deliver employment, education, and I guess social service programming to individuals in the region with a primary focus on youth. From 2007 to 2013, we actually operated a YMCA Youth Employment Center funded by Service Canada initially and then devolved to the province. They disappeared in 2013, and we've been looking for new and innovative ways to continue doing the work that we were doing there since. We're currently involved in a project through WIC NL, researching best practices around, it's an employment project, researching best practices around employment for individuals. We've got a bit of a broader age group, 15 to 45 is our age range. We find youth are getting older. And we are also in partnership with the Tamarack Institute right now in the midst of a 5-year project called Communities Building Youth Futures. With our Communities Building Youth Futures project, we have 3 priority areas for youth: education, employment, and engagement. So we have we work pretty much as a team down there. We're also the host organization for the Community Youth Network for Corner Brook and Bay of Islands. So with that network of staff that are really committed to seeing youth grow and flourish and become their best selves, I guess we're just excited about the work we're doing currently and looking forward to how we can actually make a change and work into the future to make things even better.
Thanks so much, Christine. We're going to go online let's start with Scott Andrews with Futurpreneur.
For sure. Thanks. My name is Scott Andrews. I'm with Futurpreneur Canada. For those that might not be aware, Futurpreneur Canada is a national nonprofit that focuses on young entrepreneurs. Our definition of youth are those under the age of 40, 18 to 39. And we provide financing in the terms of small startup loans, mentorship, and free business resources to those young Canadians looking at launching a business. I've been involved in this enterprise space, entrepreneurship space for a while now. I'll just say at least over 20 years. I'll leave it at that. And with the past 8 to 10 years-ish, more focused on youth enterprise and startups.
Thanks so much, Scott. And we'll go to Ian.
Hello. I'm bringing a similar lens to Scott. I'm CNA's new business development officer of entrepreneurship, and we're actually located in Stephenville, but we're covering the whole province, obviously right to St. John's and right up to Labrador. So we're focusing on supporting students and alumni start their businesses, create their businesses, and actually manage and develop their businesses as well. So we're rolling out a suite of different activities. We actually had our first workshop last night that was hosted by the YMCA of NL, Ted Cadigan. We're also looking into a mentorship program along with building our website, which is actually launched now. We launched that 2 weeks ago. We're also having a couple of different events. We're hoping to have an entrepreneurship competition, as well as host a podcast that features students and alumni, entrepreneurs, and really just highlights those people. Yeah, so that's a bit about me, and looking forward to speaking a bit about the topic today.
Thanks so much, Ian. I'm going to start the first question, and I'm going to toss it to Christine, I think, to get us started. And, given that your work with young people in the region, what are the main gaps you're seeing from the youth you're supporting?
I think a lot of the gaps have already been identified as we're talking here this morning. I think everybody is experiencing a lot of the same barriers related to transportation issues, food security, housing. Transportation's huge here without a bus system that can safely get somebody to work in a timely fashion. So systems navigation is a biggie. Lack of awareness of what exists in the community. And who's out there and who's doing what and how they can help. I guess in terms of gaps, the list goes on. And I think they're common. They're common right across the province. They're common in our community, and they've been identified fairly broadly. Second part of the question?
Yes,
my brain is going
sure.
on. I'm rolling.
And what skills? So from there, like those kind of gaps, what skills or training are they looking for that they're just not getting necessarily from traditional systems?
I'm thinking the most important thing in terms of, not even identifying what they're not getting is the very first thing that we need to do is build a relationship with the youth that comes through our door. I think, as was mentioned earlier, the hardest part is to get someone to cross that threshold, to come in and actually meet with them. And when they do come in, the very first step is to get to know them. So I think somebody used the term active listening earlier. I think we have to sit with that person and we have to get to know that person, and we have to build a level of comfort. If they're not comfortable with us, they don't see us as somebody that they can open up to and share, then we're not going to move forward. That's going to be the stumbling block right off the bat. So once we actually get to know the person, that they feel comfortable sharing that information, then we have to find a way to collect that information in a way that's meaningful to that youth, so that they can then identify, because they probably haven't thought about what they need or what they want. They just know they're not in a good place right now and they need to get somewhere else. Where that is, they probably have no idea. So then we become their guide. We help them work through one of the tools that we're using right now that we didn't have before, and I think we actually did our training with Choices, I believe, was the Prime as a resource. And I find Prime is a really rich resource, and it gives us really meaningful information. It gives us an opportunity to share, for them to share with us and for us to have a beginning point. And again, the most important thing for us is to start where that youth is. You know, we have to meet them where they are in that moment. We don't worry about the past, but we worry, okay, here's where we are today. How do we move forward? And then again, we have to learn how to celebrate those incremental steps, because traditionally with employment programs or initiatives that are funded through various funding organizations, the measures of success are almost unattainable. For us, sometimes the measure of success is somebody has actually gotten out of bed that morning and showed up. That's for that person in their life at that moment, that's a huge success. The fact that they can keep coming is a huge success. So if I'm being evaluated on a program and my measure is this youth in school? Check. Is this youth working? Check. Well, no, I have no success. So we have no success. But if we look at that continuum and that information that we gather through those resources, we see huge successes. We see huge progression along the continuum, and a whole lot of opportunities to celebrate the accomplishments that the youth have when they cross our doors, when they from their starting point to where they are, you know, at any point in time moving along that continuum. So we have to celebrate those things and build on those things, and it takes a long time. I remember when I first began really being with the YMCA. I visited Stephenville, actually. There was an employment center there. And I remember the person that was working there at the time said, you know, often it takes 3, 4, 5 or more interventions before a person is able to set out on their path and be successful. And we have to accept that and embrace it and work with the people where they are. And I thought that was very telling. And if you look at somebody who has, before they cross our doors, 18 to 20 years of life experience behind them, that's thrown a lot of crap at them and a lot of barriers. How do we expect our 9-week, 6-week, 8-week, 3-month program to solve all the woes they have and move them forward? So I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah, you certainly have.
I'll stop there and let somebody else talk.
If I may, I love what you said about them just showing up being a win, because we treat it exactly the same way. That like those little wins are so important. And I try to instill that in my young people all the time. One of the things that I teach is interview techniques. And I always say, what's the first thing that you do when you get a job interview? And they'll have various things like research the company, and I'll say, no, celebrate. Like, you made it through the pile of resumes. You got the interview. So let's celebrate that win first, and then let's move on to the next one. And it's just so important to build up the confidence and self-esteem. Like, it's so important to see a young person's eyes light up when they realize they can do something, you know? I'll tell one story before we move on to the next question. I had a group of young people, and the first program I taught at Choices was our Youth Ventures program. And I had one young person who came to the program, and they were not in a good place. They were most definitely not in a great place, not what you would expect when you think of the Youth Ventures program. But you know what? They came every day. They came every day. And I remember I brought them to the Youth Ventures Awards, which were in the middle of the summer. None of my guys were really eligible for awards. They'd only just started the program, but I brought them anyway so they could see it. And I remember sitting next to him, and I remember him watching a girl get an award. And the girl was in grade, I think she was in grade 7. And he turned to me and he was like, "She did that." I was like, "Yeah, sure, she's only in grade 7. I said, yeah, I know. He's like, sure, if she can do that, I can do that. And I was like, that's exactly why you're here, right? That was for me a huge moment, like seeing that idea light up in his eyes that I have something to offer. I can do something too, you know? There you go.
Thanks, Rory. Stacey, I wanted you to chime in on this one in terms of the I guess the barriers or issues with the population that you're working with, and like what are those main gaps, and I guess what do folks in your community need in order to kind of, I guess, climb that hill?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think we partnered really well with Choices for Youth because we shared a lot of the same organizational values, and so many of the pieces that we've been talking about today are values that built the resources that Mokami already has. So when we talk about gaps that some of our participants have faced, housing is certainly one of them. But as I mentioned, we do have a supportive living program. So some of our residents are actually living in our supportive living program and working downstairs in our thrift store. So it's been really beautiful to see how those things connect. We know it, but we're actually able to see it within our own building of them coming through the doors, through our housing first approach, getting them settled, dealing with the things that show up once you actually get settled in a house. Because I think too often we expect that once we put someone in a house or put someone in a job, they're going to soar, right? And they will, but it takes time. And we've seen that too. So I don't think that's any different in Labrador as it is anywhere else in the province. It takes time. One thing that we haven't talked about today, though, that I think we really bring an interesting perspective and are looking through this lens all the time is gender-based needs and gender-based violence in particular. So that is something that is particularly prevalent in Labrador. And we're seeing it show up in the people that we serve all the time. And so that means we need to be informed in a different way and support in a different way, recognizing that there are different needs that need to be met during a supportive employment program when people are experiencing gender-based violence. And just to give you a very simple example, being on a phone during work hours is typically a no-no. But when we're looking through the lens of gender-based violence, sometimes people are on their phone because an abusive partner is messaging them. And they're protecting themselves and trying to protect their safety by answering, because they know if they don't answer, then things could get really scary and really dangerous for them. So that's a lens that we offer, I think, the supportive employment world, because our participants are women and gender diverse folks, and they're often the ones disproportionately experiencing that type of violence. So yeah, that is something that we have been working through and navigating and trying to find person-centered ways of supporting folks.
Thanks, Stacey. I always think of social enterprise has the opportunity to be that patient employer to some degree. And when you think about what it means to be a supportive employment program, is recognizing the barriers that folks face and what perhaps may need to happen for them to maintain their employment. And in that case, maintain their safety. So that's a fabulous point. I'm going to take it to the folks, the entrepreneurship folks online. And Scott, I'll start with you. And the question I have for you is, what do you see as the barriers to young people starting businesses right now in communities across Newfoundland and Labrador? Like, what are the things that are really kind of holding young people back when they are thinking about starting a new venture?
Yeah, for sure. Like we said, myself and Ian are coming from a different perspective, the entrepreneurial space. I definitely think, Chelsey, it's probably the biggest gap, that the biggest piece of feedback that I get from our young entrepreneurs that connect with us is just simply access to funding for young entrepreneurs starting up. That would definitely be the number one piece of feedback that we get for when a young entrepreneur is looking at launching a business. Just that access to specific funding for youth-based entrepreneurs, whatever your definition of young entrepreneurs is, there's definitely some amazing programs out there, like was mentioned, Rory said and stuff, CBDCs do great work with youth ventures and other groups and stuff, definitely focus on youth. But it's the biggest piece of feedback that we get is, what other funding programs might be out there for younger entrepreneurs, just to help them support their business, especially when it comes to, and again, it's the sheer reason why Futurpreneur Canada was created over 25 years ago, was because young entrepreneurs typically have, see a lot of challenges or barriers funding businesses because of lack of a credit score or credit or equity or security or collateral, the traditional types of funding and stuff. So it's the biggest piece of feedback that we see is that where do young people go to start up, a business? What are funding opportunities that we have? Simply because they're young. A lot of people don't take them serious because they might not have the experience and stuff like that. So definitely the funding options, especially in more the traditional retail type sectors and stuff, has been the biggest piece of feedback. And I'd say to the second part of that question, the skills training piece, is that for young entrepreneurs, just the lack of awareness for credit education is probably what I see as the biggest gap that I notice out there, because even organizations that are specifically focused to help youth entrepreneurship, there's usually still a credit check piece or a credit piece and stuff like that, and just lack of overall knowledge with the individual's credit score and how that might impact them securing credit is definitely the biggest educational piece that there's a gap that I would love to see addressed.
Scott, just a follow-up question for me. And
Sure.
do you find that there is, for young people, even within themselves, around that financial piece, like fear or risk or fear of losing it all, or fear of taking on debt? Like, is that confidence component part of the barrier to financing as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a bit of both. So I think it's the lack of knowledge or just simple awareness of that credit piece, and and your personal credit score, and the fact that what you have done or haven't done in the past, credit related wise, can impact your future. And simply the threshold, Chelsey, of taking on debt,
Hmm.
especially that risk assessment, depending on the time of the year or the sectors, pre-COVID, it was different. In the middle of COVID, it was different. Right now, it's even more different with the inflation numbers and the interest rates. So definitely seeing different risk assessment levels, like, should I be taking on this loan or debt right now? Is this a good time for me? So yeah, there's definitely a lot of other under the scenes factors that go along with that credit piece for sure.
Totally. Thanks, Scott. Ian, I'm interested from your perspective in the college space, and there's a lot of energy around entrepreneurship and excitement around entrepreneurship of what's possible. Do you see in the students that come to you, do you see any major gaps for young people as they're trying to kind of understand or see themselves in an entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing for us, we're just launching our initiative, our entrepreneurship initiative. So right now we're really trying to get the word out about what services are available. And I think that's one of the major gaps. When we had a workshop last night, there was a participant that came and they got a alumni newsletter. And of course, the training session was in the alumni newsletter. And when he actually got the email, he was working on his business plan. So he was like, this is perfect timing. I didn't know these supports were out there. So I think the lack of knowledge about what's actually out there is critical for students or any entrepreneurs actually trying to get started. And like Scott said, there are tons of different supports out there, absolutely tons, and great supports that are really going to support any entrepreneur looking to get started. So just getting the word out there and spreading that. If you know an entrepreneur that's in need of supports, you can redirect them to the appropriate services.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ian. So I'm going to go to Rory. I'm going to start with you this time. You okay with it? And my question, is a little bit of framing, but, we know youth training has to really change as a consequence of the pandemic. Like, where we were, where we are two very different things, from technology to changes in how we interact with one another. Like, all these new things have I think are cause for change in youth training. What do you think Can you describe your experience with what has changed and how you've navigated the change, and perhaps identify one or two things that you think are here to stay?
Ooh. It's a really interesting question, especially when, again, like I said earlier, when we're working in such an innovative space at Choices for Youth at the department, and where our programming is always changing. We've had to react pretty quickly and in real time around the pandemic. So one of the offshoots of our training programs is, yes, they provide young people with employability skills, but they also act as feeders, as I mentioned earlier, into our social enterprises. So Impact Construction is a construction company like any other. They bid on jobs, and if they get those jobs, they need young workers to, to train on the job and deliver on those services. So recruitment definitely changed during the pandemic. I think one of the big barriers was that a lot of young people were using CERB, which was a great service for our young people. It provided them with, income during the pandemic. However, coming off of CERB was very tricky for our young people, trying to figure out how to go from CERB back to income support or youth services or whatever particular program they were on. I think it was hard to attract them to work while CERB was still happening. So for me, I always offering these paid training programs, that was a real thing to push. If you come here, yes, we're going to train you, but you're getting paid for it. You know what I mean? It is a job. We're going to treat it like a job, and you're going to treat it like a job. When suddenly there was a brief period where money was kind of not the issue anymore. Young people had money in their pockets. And so it was more about, well, what can we give you in these training programs to make them attractive to you so you can move forward in your path, whatever that path may be. And can we be there to help you when these supports suddenly lessen or go away? So that was really tricky. And so I think we learned to be pretty agile in our recruitment, which was really good. I think we learned to react to young people in real time. You have a young person come in, suddenly I'm not able to have 10 people in a classroom. Suddenly, because of COVID, I had to whittle down to 5. So not only do I have to offer more services and more training programs to meet our numbers and to feel like we're making a real difference, but also I have to adjust the training to those smaller numbers as well. So I think what it really taught us was how to be adaptive, agile, and be able to pivot. I think those were the big learnings. And I think as COVID may or may not be, drifting away from us, maybe not, I think those are valuable skills to keep using, especially when we're using young people that a lot of them are in survival mode. They've been adapting their whole lives. Now it's time for us to adapt to them and help them.
Thanks, Rory.
Okay.
I'm going to go to Stacey. Why don't you pick up? Same question. Things are changing, and how did COVID-19 affect your service delivery, and what changes do you think are here to stay?
So our supportive employment program just recently started, so I can't speak specifically to how COVID impacted that. But more generally, I think COVID-19 brought about a lot of complexities. But one thing that I think across the board for all humans, what we realized during COVID-19 when we were facing a lot of isolation was we need community and we need connection. We all need that. No matter your age or your gender or your background, that is something we all need. And I think that if COVID-19 could teach us anything, I think that is something that we can all take away and be intentional about including care in our programs and services, because at the end of the day, we can have all the infrastructure we want, we can have all the programs we want, but if we're not doing it in a caring way, then it doesn't matter. So I speak to my team all the time about using care as an intervention. Care is an intervention to violence. Care is an intervention to homelessness. If we're using care intentionally, really being being with people, being human with people, active listening, as was mentioned earlier. A line that I heard many years ago that stuck with me and has resonated with me so much is that sometimes I think in this field, we look for solutions to fix instead of being with people and hearing. And so the line that always sticks with me whenever I walk into a room with a participant is listening is enough. Because if we are listening, they will guide us to where they need to be. People are the experts in their own life. So yeah, that was a bit of a mouthful, but to summarize, I think care is an intervention, active listening, and people are the experts in their own lives. I think COVID taught us all that.
That's fabulous, Stacey. Thank you so much. I've got a question this will go to all the panel, but I want to start with the entrepreneurship folks on the call. And, for reflecting on your work with young people in entrepreneurship, what role do you think mental wellness or mental health for young people, what does that play? How does that play into your work in the economic development space? Scott, let's start with you.
How so? Just rephrase, Chelsey. Just
Sure.
like overall.
So how does mental health or mental wellness for young people show up in your work in supporting young entrepreneurs?
I think it shows up in a variety of different ways. And you could look at that in a bunch, on a whole spectrum. Like, I think it really, from our perspective, you can almost look at it from the career, a paradigm from that point of view, because we still get a lot of people who connect with us, and again, specifically with us youth entrepreneurs, who are still looking at entrepreneurship, and they're still at the idea stage, early stage ideas, which is amazing, which is what we want to foster. But a lot of them are still so early stage, they're pre-launch, so they're not sure what it is that they want to do. And a lot of the supports that we provide early stage, it's almost like that career counseling piece. Yeah. Even though we're entrepreneur related, it's almost like more career counseling, because they're almost at that crossroads to say, like, hey, Scott, like, I have a business idea. I'm currently employed right now. I have a job. I hate my job. I don't have a job. I'm looking at self-employment as a career opportunity. This is what I'm thinking about doing, or I want to change careers because this is where I'm at currently in my life or in my place. So it's a lot of times it simply comes to that, and it's helping foster or look at, are you in a good space right now to go, to encourage entrepreneurship? Is this a good place? And I've had so many young potential entrepreneurs who have self-disclosed to me that they have a business idea, they're thinking about launching, this is what they want to do, early stage, but maybe right now, because what they have happening in their life, whatever that might be, maybe this is not the right time for them to launch. Maybe, maybe in the future, they're going to wait a little bit time. And again, it could be for whatever reason. Like I said earlier, my previous response, maybe it's credit related issue. I had 2 people this morning already say the reason why I'm going to hold off is because I want to build and work upon my credit. That's just one piece. And I've had other people, once we really took a deep dive, even though entrepreneurship was what they wanted to do, they realized they weren't in a good space right now to go through, the entrepreneurship piece and carry it. And they said, you know what, I'm just going to do a little bit more work first on myself, and then hopefully I'll be in a better position in the future to carry out this dream, to do it. So I think it's a huge piece, and I think it often gets overlooked. And we always encourage that open communication, to chat, just to see.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I asked that question because I think that it's not dissimilar to, going in an employment or changing career paths or doing those things. There is a vulnerability that comes out of that, saying you're going to do a thing, you're going to open a business, you're going to risk things. And being young, I laugh because there, on one hand, you could feel like I'm young, I have nothing to lose. On the other hand, starting a business is a very serious thing, and you could lose a lot, including like parts of your, self-efficacy or self-worth if it doesn't work out. And I'm always so curious what the take on mental health in and around supporting entrepreneurs to get to that. And it sounds like, Scott, you've done You do a fantastic job on that coaching end of things, in the preparation of what it means to be mentally prepared in which to start a business is such a critical part of that, would you say?
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. I totally agree. And I think like we really try to do a deep dive. Like the first thing that I ask somebody, if they just call me, and again, people see our ads on Instagram and stuff. So when somebody calls me up, I don't know what their background is. It's just like, hey, what's this Futurpreneur Canada all about? I hate my job. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't have a job. This is what I want to do. They're just, they're at that information gathering stage. And the first question that I always ask people is that, like, why do you want to do this? Like, once they tell me their idea, like, what is it about this? Like, is it a means to an end and stuff like that? And just getting to that grassroots level, like, are you really passionate about this? Do you see a gap in the marketplace? Is it something that you really want to do? And oftentimes, if somebody is honest with themselves, if they do a self-assessment, sometimes they realize that, wow, I never really thought about that. Like Chelsey, like we try to bring up those points. We don't want to discourage, but like, I think sometimes, especially young entrepreneurs, which is who I deal with exclusively, they just see all the positives of the self-employment entrepreneurship piece, because like, I just want to be my own boss. I want to be able to sleep in. I want to be able to, I don't want somebody else telling me what to do. And they might not realize the other pieces that might come with that as well. So just making sure that they're in the right place. And they've thought about the factors before they move on to the next step, which could be trying to secure funding and a loan.
That's great. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate that. Ian, I'm curious on what's required for young people in your world around mental health supports and getting involved in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, of course. So I think just to echo on Scott's words, he did a fantastic job at answering that question. But also starting a business, there's high stress levels, starting, managing, continuing on with your business. So just connecting them with the right mental health supports and actually, reaching out and letting them know there are supports out there is absolutely essential. It's a lot of the time, entrepreneurship, late nights, early mornings, not much sleep. Like I said, extremely high stress levels a lot of the time. So just letting them know that there are supports out there, and just, making sure they're taking care of themselves as well as their business.
That's great. Thanks, Ian. I'm going to go to Christine, and here's, this is how we're going to start really kind of thinking with the rest of the day. But what investments would you like to see to strengthen youth training and employment opportunities in our province? So what are the key investments that are going to be required?
I'll try to narrow it down. I think there needs to be an investment in people. I think, we need resource people. We need a team. We don't on the ground right now have the capacity. I don't believe we have the capacity in the community, and sort of referencing Jade's comment earlier about the support teams that were in place with Choices for Youth. I think we're fortunate in our community in that we rely heavily on each other, and there's a lot of trust amongst organizations, and so we reach out to each other for supports, but they're pretty informal in nature. So I think that, an investment in human, real people, feet on the ground, not the top level, but the doers, the people on the ground that make the connections. I think we have to be willing to invest in innovative ways of supporting employment and not have, packaged funding models. I look at things like short-term mentorships with incentives for employers, or short-term work placements where youth get the opportunity to investigate an area of interest. That's not a long-term commitment, but there has to be some remuneration or some incentive for that person to participate. I think we have to become increasingly, or be given the ability to be very nimble in how we address an individual's needs and what that might look like. We also have to find a way to make a meaningful connection with employers. And in our community, a lot of our employers are small. Sometimes you're looking at, a family-based business or a small business, 4 to 5 employees, who may have a commitment to youth in the community, but do not have the capacity to take time away from work to dedicate it to the youth that's coming in, that's coming with baggage, So we're asking employers, sometimes we offer them up as an advantage to your business to bring this youth on. We're going to give you extra help. But really, what we're asking you to do is take this person under your wing. Let them know what your business is like. Let them job shadow and let them learn. So essentially, they're mentoring. So how do we find ways to bring value to that? Because there has to be ways for those things to be supported, whether it's with job coaches, employment navigators, there's I guess a whole body of what we need on the ground to support those things. And it needs to be seen not as it needs to be seen as a valuable investment to put those supports in place at the ground level, because ultimately at the end of the day, we will see the rewards. We will see the youth moving forward. We will see them employed, but that ground level investment to start is critical, or we're not going to be able to launch. We'll continue on pretty well the way that we've been doing, piecemeal, having limited success, having some successes sometimes where we're, oh my gosh, this funding program is cut. What the heck are we going to do now? I think it was you used the word contortionist this morning. And I feel like that I think probably anybody in the not-for-profit sector or anybody working youth programs knows what it's like to be that contortionist, to look at a proposal and say, well, how can I make that fit what I need? How can I twist and turn and make that work for us? So I think what we need is a ground level understanding. You talked about the first presentation with newborn Lambert. And we were talking, Sharon, earlier, you can take immigrant or new Canadian or youth, or we can take all those little acronyms out and insert our own particular group that we serve. And a lot of the stuff that was said was very relevant. We need to meet people where they are. We need to put the supports in place for them. Understanding that it takes time. So multi-year funding is critical, going for 6 months to even a 2 to 3 year project. We can't tell, or we're not going to be able to show the impact. We're not going to be able to show the results without a long-term investment and a commitment to making a difference on the ground.
That's great, Christine. Stacey, same question. What investments would you like to see to strengthen youth training and employment?
So I think it's been said many times today, people are our most important and valuable resource. So that means we need to keep them safe. And so in the context of what I mentioned earlier as one of the gaps, the lack of awareness about gender-based violence, I think that is something all employers, businesses, educational institutions, supportive employment programs, community organizations, all of us can be doing more education around gender-based violence. So I will put a little plug here. Our sister organization in St. John's, the St. John's Status of Women Council, has created a fantastic resource called Empowering Them. It's a 2-hour course. It's free for anyone, and it really walks you through how to support people experiencing gender-based violence. So it is a course for everyone. It's very accessible. It's very trauma-informed. So I'm sitting here imagining, what if everyone in this room took that back to their teams? How many more spaces we could be making much safer and more informed around gender-based violence. And I think that's only going to protect our youth and make them more successful in achieving the dreams that are relevant and meaningful to them.
Thanks, Stacey. Rory, same question.
Hello. I think there's been a lot of awesome suggestions. I think for me, as someone who runs paid training programming, what I'd like to see, and I think we're seeing the beginning of it with the income support pilot, with changes to that system. I think what I need to see is allowances and incentives for young people to navigate their way off of systems and into employment. That's what I really want to see. I want to see young people that know that they can take a chance and put themselves out there and get a job, try a program, and know that their finances are going to be intact and they're going to be safe. That's the most important thing for me, is just young people feeling safe to take a chance.
Thanks, Rory. And for those of you who were at the event last night, you'd heard Minister Abbott talk about the basic income program for young people in care. It's such an interesting, such a transformative decision to do that, because as Rory said, it's that idea of how do you be safe to navigate emerging adulthood without the stability in which to do that. And very grateful for that announcement, and look forward to other announcements to come. I'm going to toss it over to Ian. Ian, what investments need to be made to encourage more youth entrepreneurship?
Yeah, for sure. So the way I kind of look at it is, and the way that our initiative is kind of we're focusing on community lifestyle businesses. So those are businesses that pretty much directly align with the programs that the college offers. And they're, usually based in rural communities, and are the staple of most rural communities that really give that employment to youth in those rural communities. The mom and pop shops, I'm glad Christine mentioned, having that navigator that can help students connect with those businesses to actually receive those supports and employment. I think that would be fantastic. But supporting those businesses to actually allow them, whether financially or training wise, to allow them to take on those students and provide the employment is essential.
Thanks, Ian. I think you're on to something, this idea of connection and navigation. Scott, same question. What investments do you see need to be made to encourage more youth entrepreneurship across the province?
For sure, yeah. I could echo everything Ian said. I'm going to take Ian on the road with me every time I go, as I'm just playing off his points. I actually wrote down a bunch, Chelsey, when everybody was talking, but I'll only highlight a couple. I just love generally when I opened with the gaps and stuff, any support specifically with the funding piece for youth-based entrepreneurship, just to get over that gap, to help more young entrepreneurs to get funding. Because again, that's the biggest piece of feedback that they share with me. So definitely, funding programs, access to funding programs as well. But to build on, like I said, what Ian said, that overall training piece, which, the college does a really, really good job. And I can break that up. And I thought about it in two pieces. I'd like to see more business launch training. And I could also look at training, so post-launch training as well. Because a lot of times people tend to forget that even though when a young person starts a business, once they're started, the other piece of feedback that I get is that that's when they tend to be forgotten about, because they're started. I get feedback. I get entrepreneurs that we funded directly call me up and say, hey, Scott, I've started, I'm in business now for a year and a half, 18 months or so. Who's out to help me? Like, I have staff, that depend on me, but yet I feel scared and alone and stuff too. So there's even like the post-launch piece. I'd like to see more in that too. Incubators, accelerators for traditional sectors and businesses. I would love to see that as well. That'd be amazing. Any supports we could provide for newcomer entrepreneurs, for international students would be huge. I did a presentation yesterday in New Brunswick to a group of newcomers and international students with amazing business ideas who want to launch, want to stay in the region, but can't get access to a lot of programs because they don't have their PR or Canadian citizenship and stuff. And to build on just to wrap up, to build on Ian's point earlier, more supports to help people navigate the ecosystem. The Newfoundland and Labrador entrepreneurial ecosystem is amazing. We have so many amazing organizations, many of them in the room there with you on the West Coast. However, when a young person has a business idea, they often don't know where to start. Like they know that these programs are out there, or they think that they're out there, but where do I go first? Are there grants? Are there programs, wage subsidies? Where do I go? Where do I get this? Just little basic pieces to help young entrepreneurs navigate the sometimes very intimidating entrepreneurial ecosystem.
That's great, Scott. Thanks so much. I will share, because I like to embarrass Scott Andrews whenever he's on a panel. So Scott helped me with my business plan when I was 21 years old, and I just moved to St. John's. And I went into his office at the YMCA at the time, and Scott helped me write my business plan, launch my company. And I still call Scott for business help. And that's many, many, many years later. We opened in 2007. And still today, I call Scott for advice. So when you think about it with some of his points in and around what it takes to, continuously support entrepreneurs in that way that takes the isolation out of it. Young entrepreneurs in particular often need that support network around them to help develop and grow. So Scott, I'll call and book a coffee with you later next week. Last question for the crowd. And my question to you is, what is the thing that excites you the most? Like thinking about, we always like to leave panels on a positive note. So what's the thing that you're super jazzed about after this panel? What gives you excitement around youth employment and entrepreneurship here in the province? Rory, I'm going to start with you.
I think I'd have to wax the Newfoundland Labrador Workforce Innovation Center's car for a minute and just say that the capacity that this research program has given us in building up our training programs is super exciting. It's super exciting to have been put in such a great place to keep these programs running, keep innovating, keep listening to young people, and keep igniting those sparks. Seeing those sparks in a young person's eyes light up, that's the thing I'm most excited about. And the more you see it, the more you want to see it.
Thanks, Rory. Stacey, same question.
Super excited to know that there are at least this many people who are champions of this work. I'm excited to see how we can grow in this field in Labrador. And I'm thinking about the individuals who are working in our supportive employment right now. And I'm thinking about how some of them, not just a year ago, were living on our trails in Labrador in weather like this. And now they are housed and have beautiful relationships built and are working in our supportive employment program and are finding purpose and exploring their identity and who they want to be. So I am so excited to see where they will go next.
Thanks, Stacey. Christine.
I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but I think, and I've used this before, but I think there's just been an interesting alignment. It's like stars are coming into alignment in terms of the fact that I think we knew things had to change for youth and to inspire youth and to inspire things happening in our province. COVID is absolutely horrible, but it's really highlighted some of the things that we already knew, and those things have been amplified, of course, since then. But I think what we see now is through the research that you guys are doing, so through the research we're doing and research numerous other organizations are doing around the province right now, we're seeing a shift in a mindset. And that's really, really important. So now we're having people having this kind of a conversation and talking about what really needs to happen and feeling committed to the future of the province and to the future of youth in the province and seeing youth as a strength and a resource. And it feels like we're on the same page. And that's exciting because we're having meaningful conversations, but it's like a common alignment of our goals. Like, there's a desire to move forward and really, really make a difference. And that's exciting.
Thanks, Christine. I'm going to go to the folks online. Ian, what makes you excited about the future of youth entrepreneurship?
Yeah, of course. I think one of the common themes here today is people. Having the people, the organizations, the supports out there, that's what's going to make the difference. Having these events like this, having the conversations, talking about it, brainstorming different ideas. That's what's going to make the difference in the end. And having these champions around the room is what's going to make the change.
Thanks, Ian. And Scott, you've got the last word all the way from St. John's. What excites you?
That's exciting. A bunch of things, Chelsey, and I'm glad you mentioned that I'm all the way in St. John's. I think the biggest thing that excites me in youth entrepreneurship is rural innovation, rural entrepreneurship. That excites me more than anything. And again, I did say I am in St. John's. I was in Corner Brook last week, met with a lot of amazing people in that room. Once we get outside of St. John's and we chat with a lot of the amazing young entrepreneurs that are all across Newfoundland and Labrador, there's just a tremendous sense of place when I chat with rural entrepreneurs. that you don't often hear. And that excites me more than ever, like wanting to stay in rural communities, other parts of Newfoundland and Labrador. They see opportunities, they see gaps, they want to stay, they want to be able to fill those needs. That excites me more than anything. The fact that so many young entrepreneurs that we deal with have an overwhelming sense of social enterprise and social innovation, which is so refreshing to hear, not just focused on for-profit businesses, looking bigger picture, climate wise, that excites me more than anything. And we, Futurpreneur Canada, we recently launched over the past couple of years some programs to help support more Indigenous entrepreneurs, more young Black entrepreneurs. Those programs, working with our teams across the country, focusing on helping supporting more young Black entrepreneurs and more Indigenous entrepreneurs through those programs. Just, yeah, really excites me to see where those programs can go.
That's great, Scott. And to all our panelists, let's give a round of applause.